everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Neighbors to Know. We're so happy that you joined us today for a very special episode with a very special neighbor here in Bedford, Mass, who's laughing right now. Today's kind of a wing it Tuesday because I have a script and I'm not kind of looking at it, and the normal things I have on the sides of the camera as my cheat sheets I'm not looking at either. So today's all about authenticity and fun and just being real, which is how things should be. So the person I have on today, before I do the grand reveal, I was on his show last week. We talked for over a half an hour with the approval of our director. And it was just very easy flow conversation, and we didn't finish talking. We ran out of time, and then he just started unmiking, and that was the end of the show. So this is kind of a to be continued and letting you get to know this person. And then I think we're still going to end up doing a part 2. So again, the premise of our show is to highlight people in town that have done extraordinary things and make it a trophy or not. And this person's done a lot of great things in town, and I'd like to introduce you to him. So without further ado, welcome Art Smith.
Ta-da, ta-da!
And I've got to put good background music in for that.
Hi, everybody.
Thanks for coming in, Art. I feel like we were just here, but our roles were reversed.
Was it just a couple hours? No, it was a couple of days ago.
It was a couple of days ago. It was really 2 weeks ago.
Last week.
I thought of my lizard, actually, because we were talking about my lizard, and he still hasn't gone to the bathroom. So I'm thinking I had to take him to the vet.
Is this the way we're going to start this show?
Sorry.
About you and your bathroom lizard?
That's not in the script at all. So no, we'll get back to that. This is all about you. This isn't about me. So
How to make a lizard go to the bathroom. Huh?
Yeah, I haven't been very good with doing his baths and stuff like I should. So
Okay.
I have to be better about that. This
All
is why
right,
I have
here we go.
fish and not dogs.
Tell Art. Ask Art.
Ask Art. Yeah, so your show is Ask Art. Mm-hmm. That's what we did 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
You film that every 2 weeks, right?
Every 2 weeks, try and get some key people from the area on so people will get to know who's around them and mostly who's serving in one capacity or the other. Mm-hmm. Humanity, each other, stuff like that.
How'd you come across meeting the people that you end up having on?
We called them up and said, got a show, I want you to be on it.
Even if they don't know who you are? Or you always know who they are?
I profess to know everybody that I call, but have I? Well, I didn't know our state senator very well, but I asked him and he came on, it was great.
Oh, wow.
There's a picture of him out there with me. And then the names of fleet my head as soon as I say them. You know who I'm talking about?
Barrett?
Barrett, Mike
Yeah.
Barrett. Mm-hmm. Thank you. You read my memory.
There's a
okay?
picture of you guys out there?
Me and Barrett are out there on the board.
Oh, on the volunteer board.
On the volunteer board. And then we have a state rep whose name is
Ken Gordon.
Ken Gordon. He's been on. And I didn't really know them well. I just knew of them. Mm-hmm. And I said, I'm doing this show, and it's about truth-telling and who you are and stuff. Mm-hmm. They both replied immediately, no hesitation.
Really?
And mostly the other people are from Bedford. You know Bedford?
Bedford.
Bedford.
I will not ever call it that.
Well,
Bedford.
When my two sons get together from the West Coast about every 5 years in Bedford, they start talking about Bedford. What's happening in Bedford, Dad?
What's their accent like on the West Coast?
It's gone. One of them's a computer nerd and the other one's an environmentalist, so they talk computer or environmental. They don't have Bedford anymore.
Yeah.
Bedford.
People would make fun of me from my accent, my New York accent.
Yeah,
But
but you said you've dropped.
Yeah. I have more of the upstate, like Midwest kind of accent, which is pretty
I
neutral.
don't think you have any accent myself.
Well, I think it's the way most people in the country talk. You know, you say your R's, you say your vowels. You know.
Bedford.
Bedford. So did you grow up in Bedford? Have you always said Bedford as in Bedford?
I was born in Somerville, Massachusetts in
Okay.
1938.
Oh, now I have to do the math. Okay. That was actually a burning question because people wanted to know how old you are. I never even asked how old you were.
I'll be 80 in August.
Wow. Never would have pegged that.
And in 1942, my father, who was a civil engineer, decided it was time to leave Somerville for reasons I don't have the vaguest idea. But he said, let's go and live somewhere on a train line so I can get to work every day. He worked in Boston. And he said, about 18 miles away. So we took a compass. You know what a compass is?
I was a math teacher. I know what a compass is.
And
Yeah.
he put the point on where he works, and the other one like was out 18 inches, and he went like this around Boston.
Yeah.
And he crossed Bedford. there's, I think in those days, 3 or 4 trains out and 3 or 4 trains back in from the railroad station. And he said, Bedford. And my mother says, we know somebody in Bedford.
Who's that?
It was a friend that introduced them when they were involved in the church in Somerville. The McQuades, Jim and McQuade, lived down on Hancock Street. So 18 miles, train line, friend in Bedford, out they come. So I moved to Bedford in September of 1938, having just turned 4.
Wow. Do you have pictures? I gotta find a picture. You have to send me a picture so I can put it in there, what you looked like when you were 4.
You like on TV?
Yeah.
No, thank you.
Come on.
I'll give you all the pictures you like. I have tons. My mother and father were, so my father in particular loved taking pictures. So
Yeah.
there's a bunch of pictures around. So we moved to Bedford. I grew up on Fletcher Road.
That's where you still are, no?
I'm down the end. Gail and I live down off of Middlesex Road, which is the last left after you go down.
I've heard about Middlesex Road because trucks go down there and they think it's
They
Middlesex
get up in our
Turnpike.
driveway and they knock on the door. Is this Middlesex Turnpike? I said, no, you're off by about 7 miles.
When they're like stuck underneath a tree because they're not supposed to be on that road.
Right. That's fun. Anyway, I lived on Fletcher Road. I spent a bunch of time in the military and then eventually came back. And so I've been here, I think it was 12 years I've been gone. So out of the coming up on 88, maybe 12 to 15 years I was elsewhere, but it was mostly military.
So 2 questions, because I was going to ask you about the military. You were Army and Navy.
When I
No?
went to Dean College, a recruiter showed up one afternoon asking people if they were interested in joining the Army Reserve. 6 of us, I think. 4. 4 of us went, yeah, we'll do it. So we enlisted in the Army Reserve, and I was in the reserve for I think about 3 years. I eventually got out of Dean, ended up working, and then for various reasons, which we could get into in sort of a private session someday, I was asked if I'd consider going on active duty. So
Oh.
I joined the Navy. I went in the Navy to see if I could fly planes, and I did fly planes a little bit, but didn't like it.
interesting.
And what I really wanted to do was be in submarines, which I ended up in finally.
That's very apropos since I have the Pan Am dress on today and, you know.
Yeah, but I
You
don't
flew
fly
planes.
anymore, sorry.
But that's neat that you did.
Yeah. I flew one trainer down in Pensacola. I got a little behind on the academics. I'm sort of I'm not retarded, but it turns out if they had the ADD kind of things in those days, I wonder if I would have been diagnosed as having a learning disability because either that or I'm psychologically imbalanced.
You know, I took a class once when I was in, hold on, just go with me here. I took a class once when I was taking my master's, or going for my master's at Binghamton University.
Yeah.
And it was a special needs class that everyone had to take if you're going to be a teacher. So she went through all the different diagnoses, and this was back in the 90s, so this
Yeah.
was even before a lot popped up that are diagnoses now.
Huh.
And I'm looking at this list and I'm like, I could probably fall into 4 of these categories. Like, my eyes are awful.
Yeah.
I've had glasses since I was 5, so that makes me visually impaired. You know, like all these different things. Challenged. Yes, yeah. I'm pigment challenged, which
Yeah.
I can't. You know, I
You're
don't
script
tan.
challenged.
I didn't. I only looked at it twice. I tried not to. But I think, yeah, like back then, people didn't talk about,
Yeah.
or maybe didn't know. But I think everyone out there has some sort of challenge. Nobody's perfect, so everyone has some sort
Oh,
of
come
challenge.
on.
You know, what you thought you were perfect?
No, I thought we were all perfect.
Wouldn't that
Yes,
be
actually, I
nice?
thought I was perfect, but I got over it very quickly.
But I mean, I think people, you know, there are so many different disabilities that
Yeah.
people have because you're just good at one thing, left brain, right brain, whatever.
Well, when I was in the flight school, they ask you to absorb stuff fairly quickly because they want to get you through flight school and get you in a helicopter and get you to Vietnam so you can get killed. So that was supposed to be a joke. Anyway,
That wasn't funny, but go ahead. I got your
so
point.
I got behind on aerodynamics and physics. I loved the flying, sort of. But academically, I was nowhere. And then they asked me to memorize all the instruments in a panel on a new trainer that I was going to go fly. They blindfold you. You study it where all the instruments are. Then they blindfold you, turn all the lights out, and ask you to point at the altimeter, point at the flaps. And I panicked. And I said, bye-bye.
That was it.
I wanted to be in submarines. So I also had a degree in architectural construction at the time from Dean College. And when they said, you're going to leave flight school, so what do you want to do? And I said, I want to be on submarines. Oh, no. What else you want to do? All right, I want to be in a construction battalion because I have a degree in architecture and construction.
Why wouldn't they let you be in submarines?
I don't know. You never know. So when I filled out all the paperwork with 3 choices of construction battalions, they sent me on a destroyer. I went to sea for a couple of years on a destroyer and became a navigator. And then somewhere in the 60s, the submarine people decided they needed navigators, and so they sent out a message, which I responded to and got transferred to a submarine. Served on subs for 5 or 6 years.
So it all ended up coming around.
Yes. Is that more than you? That's more than that question.
No, I'm not
warranted.
looking. Stop looking at the script.
I'm not. I'm just looking at the yellow thing.
Oh, the yellow things? Yeah, we covered that. Look, it says Army, Navy. It also says tattoos. So I'll skip right into that because I think when I read that there's an article that you had in Citizen, so I did read that. It was from last year, unless that's just made up.
What was it?
Julie, I assumed it was Julie Turner. I didn't actually look to see who wrote it, but somebody interviewing you,
Oh, I
asking
was
you
on
questions. You don't remember? It was August of last year.
Oh, that was Dot Bergen.
Maybe. It was somebody on the Citizen.
Yeah, it was Dot.
And that's when they mentioned the Army-Navy thing, which I didn't know about. So, and your tattoos remind me of like Navy-based things,
Yeah.
aqua things.
So when I was
So I
in the
need to hear the
service-
story.
When I was in the service, I sort of envied people who had tattoos, but I never got one. And when I was a kid, Charlie Stefanelli, who used to run a little grocery market here in the center, was a World War II veteran. He was covered with tattoos. And I used to go in there sometimes. My mother would send me down to buy something. I'd go in there and have a Coke and a
A Coke and a Dream. Wasn't that the commercial?
Yeah.
I had a Coke and a Dream.
And I'd talk to Charlie and stare at his tattoos.
Yeah.
Anyway, somewhere long after I got out of the service, I started a construction company, and this was my logo, this little dragon here.
Oh.
And when we went up to, when a wife of mine and I went up to New Hampshire, we went by a tattoo shop, and I saw in the window that little design. And she said, encouraging as she was, why don't you get a tattoo? I went and got a tattoo, so I got that. So that's one tattoo.
And then they're addictive, I've heard.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then my son Russell, who's an environmental nut and a hydrology expert out in Montana, and a fisherman and a hunter, has a Bedford flag on his shoulder. It's a beautiful tattoo. I'll get a picture of it.
Okay.
And so he has a friend who does tattooing, doesn't do it professionally. So I said, you know, he said, Dad, you're out of balance. You need one on the other side. So with a pilot pen, I drew this thing, and we went off to his friend, and he did it.
So you just drew it randomly?
Yeah, and then the next summer, when I was out there, he said, Dad, you're out of balance again. So then we got this one. So
Peer pressure.
it's kind of like me and Russell and loving tattoos. I have no compunctions, is that a word? I think it's a word, about tattoos. I love tattoos. I think my father would have said, Arthur, nobody's going to ever hire you if I have a tattoo. And I said, no, I can't say that on here. No, I said, no, Dad, no, Dad, I won't.
That wasn't at all.
No.
That was very unauthentic of you, but go ahead.
And my son Chris, who's a photo straight-laced brainiac, I don't know where he got all his brains from, but he's a mathematician. And when I go to California, somebody will say, your dad has tattoos. And Chris will go,
Really?
I don't know why. Russell goes, somebody says to Russell, why do you have tattoos? And he looks at them and says, why don't you have tattoos? So tattoos doesn't bother me, and some of them are sort of stupid. And, I mean, I put some thought into these.
Yeah, I think they tell stories of like things that, whatever about you.
Yeah.
It's been on
I
my
have one
bucket
woman
list.
who, I went to dinner at my friend Rich's, and they have a female friend who's a nurse from Europe somewhere. And she looked at my arm, she said, it's infected, it's infected.
You purposely put it there.
I put it there. And there's one up here. There's one there, a red one there.
So what's the red dot for?
I don't know.
So putting a
I
red
said,
dot
I'm looking
on.
at it, I said, you know, it'd be nice to have a red dot there.
You just put a little butterfly on the side. No, I don't see that happening.
But there's guys that have hearts with the swords through them, and moms and girlfriends.
Oh, girlfriends, and then they cover them up because
And then they have
break
them
up
erased, and you get your laser treatment. And
Yeah.
so tattoos is a little bit of a lark, and it's my way of staying 16.
So are you going to continue going
Yes,
with this?
when I go to Montana next year, I think I'm going to develop this one further up my arm. I don't know.
Yeah. You'll come back next year and you'll be like here, all the way up.
The
and
guy
down.
that does them is this great guy. He sort of knows. I mean, if a real tattoo artist would look at these and say, well, he should have done this, he should have done that, and that's terrible, but
I think it's personal.
I like
you know?
them.
Yeah, I think it's personal to who you are.
When I first got them, I wondered, what are people going to think? And then I said, I don't care what they think.
Yeah.
I do, but I can't afford to worry about it.
No,
If I'm going to be authentic, then I authentically love tattoos, so why not have one?
Yeah. So let's go after the show
Yeah,
and just
right.
ink me up.
What's next?
The architectural firm. Everyone knows you, I guess, as that. I didn't know that about you. I knew some other parts about you, but so I know that you own an architecture company. How long has that been going on?
I don't know, you got another hour? Very quickly, when I went to Dean, I went to Dean because my girlfriend in Concord said, you either go to college or we're breaking up. So
There's no pressure.
I was almost flunked out of Concord High School, and we looked at a Dean brochure which some friend of hers had, and we flicked through the pages, and when the architecture came through, she went, that looks like you. My father was a civil engineer, and I was always drawing and used his instruments and stuff. So I went after Dean on the recommendation of my girlfriend. The admissions counselor at Dean looked at me and said, Arthur, there's not a school in the country that'll touch you with a 10-foot pole. You're
Why?
accepted.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah. It was a little
Because-
tongue-in-cheek. I was a D- something in high school. I was a transplant from Bedford to Concord. In those days, we went to Concord High School, and I hated it. Hated the social pressure. I mean, I thrived in some ways. I sang, I was in musicals and stuff.
Is it kind of the way it is now with how large it is? And
Yeah, but it's those snotty people over there.
no, no, I get it. I mean, we're between Lexington and Concord.
I know,
and
we're
then, we're the
nobody.
sleepy town in between. We're not nobody.
Where you
We're
from?
just like,
Where you
you know,
from? Oh, what's the name of your town? Well, we're between Concord and Lexington.
Yeah.
What's the name of the town? Well, it's Bedford. Bedford.
People shouldn't
Anyway,
judge.
I graduated
They don't
Dean.
spray their mosquito. Can I just throw that out there? They don't spray their mosquitoes out there. So when we went to move here,
Yeah, fight 'em.
I'm not living. I went there and I went for ice cream, and it was like a bloodbath with them attacking me. I get the whole conservation thing, but you can't be outside because they don't
Yeah.
spray. Maybe they do now. When I moved
Well,
here 8 years ago, they didn't spray for mosquitoes, and for those that aren't local, they don't. There's mosquitoes everywhere because there's so much wetlands here. So that's why I chose not to live. Well, that and the fact that I couldn't afford a $6 million house.
Yeah. So I studied architecture at Dean. It was a 2-year program. It's architectural construction. I went to work for an architect over in Concord for a little while, got involved in construction a little while. Chief of police at the time told me I might consider joining the service because I was being a bad boy. So I went in the
Turn
service.
around.
And when I got out of the service, I got a job at Polaroid in their plant engineering department as a draftsman. So from there on, I sort of took off. I never went back to school for architecture, and I ended up being a partner in my firm because I had all that experience. By the time I was a partner, I'd had 9-10 years of experience in architecture. I was pretty good at it, and I was actually teaching architecture.
So what exactly were you doing? Like designing stuff or actually building or what?
I was all design work then.
Okay.
I did a mental health center in Brockton, and I did Bedford Village behind Marshall's.
Really? I heard recently that got bought over.
It did. I mean, the original financing agreement apparently was up. It was time to whatever, and so it was sold. Friends of mine owned it, but I was the partner in charge and the architect for that project in 1974. Took it through every town committee and finally got it passed at town meeting. I did the Lexington Mews, on Walden, Muzzy Street. I did lots of houses around Bedford, lots of additions. I did a 26-lot subdivision in Sudbury and a 4-unit subdivision in somewhere out there.
Did you
way
make
out
my
there.
apartment complex?
Huh?
Did you make my apartment complex? was Bedford
No,
Village
I was
the
on
only?
the planning board then when that thing got approved.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So anyway, I morphed into this architectural world without getting back to school because my parents at the time couldn't afford to send me. I got accepted at RISD and one other and really wanted to go, but and I gave up on it. Anyway, Dean worked a little while, went in the service, got out of the service, became a partner in a firm, and in October of 1980-something, stock market went crazy. We lost all our funding, and that was the beginning of my self-employment career.
Self-employment doing what?
Doing architecture and construction. I eventually had a design-build company where I wanted to do that because I was sick of builders taking off with my designs and doing whatever they felt like with them. So I thought I'd have more control over it. I think I'm a pretty good designer. I'm great with, meeting people's needs in terms of conversation about what to do and getting it done, but I'm not a very good businessman. I confess.
It takes a lot of aspects, I guess, to go through that.
Yeah, and the construction business is up and down. Sometimes you're rich, sometimes you're poor. And if it catches you on the poor side, I had 17 employees over in Wayland at one point, and I had 8 here, and ended up having to close the businesses because the market went to poop. So I didn't say the other word.
Thank you, Art.
Yeah. So architecture was sort of a love and a hobby. Somewhere in there, I went off and got a degree in psychology.
Are you reading? Stop reading off. You know
I'm
what?
not
I'm gonna
reading. I
flip
can't. I
this
can't
way.
even see it.
Okay, good. I'm flipping it over anyway.
I'm just keep talking because you haven't asked me any questions, so I'm just going to keep talking.
You want me to keep going with my questions?
No,
Because you're actually answering them as you're talking.
I know. You thought I was reading that. I knew what you were going to do. So, somewhere in my career, I ended up in psychotherapy.
That was my next question. You read ahead.
Did marriage counseling. I got fascinated by the process, so I decided, you know what I'd really like to do is to be a therapist.
That's a tough career to go into.
So I did an internship with a company that was supposed to get me a college, but I didn't. But I did the internship. I had a partnership with a woman. We ran a therapy business, and I went to Lesley College and got a degree in counseling psych. So that I have a master's in. I was the first master's degree in my whole family, I think.
Really?
My son has got doctorates, probably. But anyway.
Well, still, I mean, I think that's a
Yeah.
huge accomplishment.
But I love doing therapy, and I really worked a lot with people who were addicted to drugs or alcohol. And in the process, found out that I was addicted to alcohol.
Oh, interesting.
So I'm a recovering alcoholic. I had about 30 years of clean sobriety, and 3 years ago, I started drinking wine again and thought, I like the social aspects of drinking.
It's hard because of the social part, yeah.
So I started drinking, and I think I'm in my 4th month, entering my 5th month of sobriety. Somewhere back there I said, I can't do this. It's going to ruin my marriage, it's going to ruin my relationship with my children. If I keep doing this, especially with being economically in tough shape, it's crazy. You go in there and you buy a glass of wine for $7. You can go down to the liquor store and get a whole bottle for $7.
Well, you don't want to
So
go
I
out and
started
buy a whole
buying
bottle, and that'll open up a whole other can
No,
of
I used
worms.
to get it by the case.
Yeah.
No, so I needed to stop, so I stopped.
Health-wise, too. I mean, there's so many.
Yeah.
It's interesting because the last 2 social get-togethers I've been at, I did not have any alcohol. And, well, one actually was yesterday. And people look at you funny.
No,
I mean,
yeah.
I'm sure you obviously must know more than, I do, but people look at you, oh, what'd you get to drink? I'm like, I just had water. Oh. Yeah, like I didn't need to, it wasn't because of any goal or anything. It's
Yeah.
just, it's loaded. I mean, I could go on my whole nutrition biz, but,
So-
health-wise,
Yeah.
between the carbs and it affecting blood pressure and, cholesterol and all this stuff, your blood flow, there's so many different parts that it affects that people don't think about until
Yeah.
something's up. And then something's up, and then doctor tells you, cut down on alcohol or just get rid of it.
So this is a little circuitous, but one of the best things that happened to Bedford was that Cinnablock and that Ken's Deli and the
The Blake Block.
pub and the pub. And I really got into that, and that was feeding my whatever. And so I stopped drinking, and then I said, I miss my friends down. I mean, they're very superficial friends in a way. They're beautiful people, but you know, you meet somebody twice. It's like I was in the Navy. You meet people twice, and you're in love with them, and that's fine. And I said, well, I don't have to not go there.
You can go.
So I go, and I drink water, or I drink lemonade, and people giggle. And
Still, really? I mean, after a couple times?
I'm used to it. I mean, after having gone so long without it, I had lots of friends who couldn't figure out why the hell I wasn't drinking, you know. But
isn't that interesting? Because you think, I mean, people that knew you and know your story should be proud and supportive that you're not. And people that don't know you, why should they care what you're... I mean, I don't know. I guess philosophically, I have a hard time with that it's abnormal to, you know, not drink when you're going out with people.
You're going to pick who you do it with.
Yeah, but I mean, you're talking about kids going to college and have that kind of thing with the peer pressure. It doesn't, that relays over to, you know, I mean, I'm 46 and it still happens. It's not, I shouldn't say pressure, but it's just everybody else is having a drink. And here, you want one? And then, you know, that could turn into 5. And, I don't want to feel that way anymore. So.
Somewhere in the process, I walked into Ken's, having come back, and I said, look, where you been? We haven't seen you. And I said, look, what I had to do is I had to stop drinking. And here's the reasons why. To a person in that place, they supported me. And they said, absolutely. Do you want us to confront you if you start? I said, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm not going to start, but I want you to know that I'm not going to drink anymore, but I'm going to continue to come in here because I love everybody in there. And so at one point, Johnny, who is one of the owner's wife, husband, came up to me and said, my distributor from Pinot Grigio is wondering why the orders aren't so big anymore. And I thought that was a riot.
Sorry.
Yeah, but I eat there and I hang out there and it's great. I love it in there.
Yeah.
And I don't have to stop doing the social things I really loved, which is probably part of the reason I started drinking in the first place, way back when. I mean, I say that a lot, particularly in groups I run with guys who are drinking. I said, I started drinking not to piss not to make everybody angry. That's
I think you can say that. It's my show. What am I talking about? You can say that.
I mean, I didn't drink to get angry. I didn't drink to get drunk to act out. I drank to have a great time. I get on tables and dance kind of thing.
But you can still do
anyway,
that.
I can still do that.
Yeah.
And I walk into the pub sometimes, and I can go from chair to chair to chair, and I'm greeting people. Want a drink? Nope. Want a lemonade? Sure.
Yeah.
So it's got to be all right.
Yeah.
And it is all right for me because my life was going down the toilet.
Well, I give you kudos for catching that and then getting right back, you know.
And ultimately, that's where the responsibility lies. I mean, there's lots of determining factors about why people get drunk and abuse drugs, but ultimately, it's either a decision based on some kind of spiritual experience or something that says, I have to stop.
Is that where when you did that article to Citizen, you mentioned something about being fascinated with rage, which I thought was interesting. Do you remember that or no?
Oh, yeah. That's one of the things I did when I started this show of mine, Ask Art, was to shift from architecture to being pissed off.
Well, and I was wondering how that way, and I purposely didn't talk to you about this beforehand while we were pulling the chairs and getting everything all set to go. Because, I mean, part of what your show, you know, from what I see of what your show brings out is the political side behind stuff. So like last week when I was talking, well, let's talk about the dog park. You know, that's not controversial at all. And we can talk about that when I talk to you next week or whenever it's going to be. But, you know, I see this political component to it. So when you were talking about the rage, and I was thinking the article was written in 2017, I didn't know if you meant rage because of all the hoo-ha with the election or if you just meant rage in general, or as you're talking now, if you meant like rage within you as you're going through all that you've gone through.
All of that.
Everything.
It started by watching TV, too much TV, MSNBC in particular. I'm a Democrat, I'm a closet liberal, and I watched that show, and watching Donald Trump get elected president and seeing the consequences of that amongst the public. I mean, he and his have given people permission to express their rage in not great ways. So I started looking at it, and I said, you know, I'd really like to shift the show some to talking about rage and how it impacts how we deal with each other. And I don't mean rage beating the crap out of something. I'm talking about an inner bull that causes people to act in ways or say things in ways that they wouldn't do that normally.
Right.
There's a catch. There's some kind of a catch. There's a click that goes, don't do that. And some people have it and some people don't. So I'm looking around at me, and I'm seeing some of my dear friends, particularly friends in construction, who are very conservative, and going, hoorah, when he talks about kicking Mexicans out of the country or something. And it just started to bother me about how so much seems to be rage-oriented in how it sort of manifests in us. And then when I started looking, I started remembering, oh, Arthur.
You
Remember?
called yourself Arthur several times today. You're very serious.
Well, my mother
today.
was like that. Remember the dogs. So I have a not great relationship with dogs. Why? I don't know.
Why did you say remember the dogs?
We're talking about rage.
Okay.
The way my rage has manifested itself in my life, obviously, is with dogs. If a dog doesn't sit when I want it to sit, or a dog doesn't climb the stairs when I want to climb, I get furious.
That's why you like cats?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, we could just flip-flop between
I love
these.
dogs, but as long as they're other people's, they're not mine. But mostly what I've discovered is there is that core of something inside of me that just wants to explode every once in a while.
I think everyone kind of has that carnal side inside, and it's a matter
Somebody's
of...
watching, and they want to know what I'm doing.
Is there commenting?
Potential spa.
Potential spa?
Spa. Spam. The other thing that was happening was with my wife. I mean, my wife would confront me about something, and my reaction to her was, I don't want to do that. It doesn't do any good, for one.
It takes time, I think, to learn that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And a couple of times, especially when I was drinking, I could feel it coming, and I'd let some of it go. And it would be immediately problematic. So I got to stop that. Not only do I have to stop drinking, I got to get control of and some insight into what's going on inside of me about this rage. I was involved. The first one I hit on about this subject was Jackie Apsler. You know Jackie?
Yes. Wait, she's on the script.
Yeah.
See?
Well, we did a.
Who is she?
She's the executive director of the. I'm going to screw this up. Domestic Violence Services Network. They have an office in the Bedford police station.
Because you did some work with her about...
They had a training.
Okay.
I went through their training, and I did a sort of simulation. They asked for volunteers, for a man and a woman, to do a role play. My psychology bullshit. So I did this role play where I was married to this woman. They took me out of the room. I'm coming home. The scene is you're coming home. Your wife's in the kitchen cooking. I come in the door and I look at her and I said, "What are you doing?" I don't know where it came from. I don't know where.
It's already negative.
I'm role playing, right? She says something and I go, "What?" And I go, "Oh." And there was a cop there who was sort of facilitating the role play. And at one point, he, playing the cop, says, "Mr. Smith, you're being indicted for blah, 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 blah. I have to take you out of here." They cuffed me.
Wow.
And took me out of the room.
Now, did she say anything in response to what you said?
Oh, yeah, she was in it. Yeah, but she was into as I remember, kind of a victim thing. I mean, clearly I was, and she was.
But I think that dynamic happens.
Oh, yeah,
because you kind of cower and then, yeah.
So they take me out of the room, he gets me out of the cuffs, and he says, "I have never seen a role play like that in my life."
Really?
I said, "Oh, really?"
Well, that's interesting because, I don't know, from my personal experience, I've lived and seen that many times.
Oh, yeah.
And now, I mean, from doing a lot of work myself with that whole dynamic, I can understand more the other side. Like, you know, everyone's got a story. You don't know what the story is of what's causing you to respond the way that you are. And she could be there making dinner or whatever, and all the stuff that's been boiling up with you as you're walking in the door is why you're imploding onto her.
Yeah. So the line between role playing and letting my feelings really go was very, very, very fragile comes to mind, but that's not the right word.
Well,
So
I think it is
on the one
fragile,
hand,
but
I'm sort of congratulated for a great role play. On the other hand, I'm inside, I'm going, holy poop. Holy poop.
You already said it once, but that's okay.
I said piss.
No, you said it earlier.
I did?
Yeah, I know. You're not even aware. It's okay. No, keep going.
But I just,
But you said that you learned a lot about yourself through the whole thing.
And
Not many people are introspective that way, that they can come across and say those things and not look inside themselves and see, okay, here's my role in whatever happened.
Oh. Some of the most frustrating work I did as a therapist was couple therapy with men and women, couples. Men are such holes.
Well, I mean
anyway, the combination of having been a therapist, the combination of not drinking and then starting it, looking at rage and all of that sort of has got me now today just looking around at what are we doing to each other. I mean, this Supreme Court nomination was a cool guy, but he's they're going to load the Supreme Court with people who are anti-women, I mean, it's just...
Everyone's fighting for something. And I mean, you know, and my naive plan of action is, you know, why can't we look at what we're all doing ourselves and...
Really?
Yeah, and then step back and say, okay, I own up. I did this. I shouldn't have done that. You know, make a change. And that person might keep coming back at you. And then you have, like you said, you have to stop it and then realize that's not who I want to be. This is who I want to be.
Not only is it not who I want to be, it's not who I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I get to is who I am not. And he's not very pretty. I just like to look around.
No, I didn't know if he was counting us down or not. Okay.
I don't know.
So let's switch. Well, yeah, that's this thing. But I'll switch to a positive note. So my disclaimer. It's funny that I don't have a disclaimer for that point, but I guess my positive note to you know, wane that, because I think that's just a large picture of stuff that just people just need to work on. You know, and want to have the desire to work on that. It's not, you know, oh, it's all his fault. Because you mentioned men. I don't think it's all men. I think everyone has a role.
I just said that because I am one. I can't speak to you.
Well, and I think there's, you know, the stories that I hear from some women. A woman can come home and a guy's sitting there making dinner, and she could do the same thing. You know, it's just a matter of looking into yourself and just having empathy. You know, the big E word.
You got to be willing.
You have to be willing and to look inside and see.
You got to be committed.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's switch on to a happy note, because I know we have to end things here. Here's my disclaimer. If you have a kid under the age of, what, like 15, you should probably tune out now, because we need to talk about Bedford Santa, and I don't want to ruin the dream for anyone that hasn't already watched.
Santa's a friend of mine. I don't care. I'll talk about
So
Santa.
that's my disclaimer. No, because I want to be open about here, you know, okay, kids are not watching. So Santa Claus.
Yeah.
When did you decide to be Santa Claus?
In 1900.
Or how did that whole thing even come about? That you're like, I want to bring love and joy to the world. There's too much conflict. I'm putting on a suit.
All right, let me tell you.
Go ahead.
In 1944, my mother and another gentleman in Bedford started the Santa program in Bedford.
Really?
Yeah.
That I did not know.
Right.
That you can't find anywhere.
Guy's name is Clayton Morrill. He ended up being a special police officer at some point. But he and my mother, and he got most of the, but I like this, my mother was there. But they started Bedford Santa, and I don't know the numbers, but I'll just make something up for the moment. There were maybe 6 Santas on Christmas Eve.
When it started?
Yeah.
Wow.
So there was a Santa, and the concept was to have a Santa, a driver, and a checker. So I've been involved with Santa since then, off and on.
Yeah.
I had Santa come and see me, and I was old enough then to know this is... But I got into it, particularly for my mother. She loved it. Then when I got older, I became a driver. Once I got my license, I think I was a driver. And at one point, I became a checker. My job was to make sure that the present we gave Santa actually belonged to the kid that was going in the house. So
important job.
What the checker was. My other job was to go get Santa and carry him out of the house when he got too loaded.
They don't do that anymore.
No, they now have a law, whatever.
It's a big asterisk. Please don't feed or provide anything to Santa besides hugs.
So when I got out of the Navy and ended up back in Bedford after a marriage, somewhere in there, I ended up volunteering and became a Christmas Eve Santa.
For the program at the middle school?
Right,
I mean?
for Christmas Eve Santa.
Yeah.
And there were probably maybe 20 Santas at that point. And I did that for a long while, went away for a while, came back for a while. At some point, they asked me if I'd be willing to do Santa for the tree lighting. I said, sure. And then Rotary asked me if I'd be Santa for the Rotary. I said, sure. There were 2 or 3 years there where I did all 3. I can't keep doing this.
You're like, I just want to shave.
So the one that I enjoyed the most, that didn't take a lot out of me, was Rotary, because I sat there and had kids in my, and it was just, it's so touching. I'll tell you a quick story. Little Oriental couple came in with this little girl, just a beautiful little girl, crying her eyes out. She didn't want to go in there, no way at all. And so her mother brings up to Santa, she's almost dragging her, and nicely, but bring her along, and she's looking at me and crying and crying and crying, and finally, I could see she sort of, you know, slumped, let her mother's hand go and walked over and crawled up into my lap. And she says, Santa, I'm sorry, I'm having a bad day.
Oh, that's awful.
Shut up. But it was stories like that.
Yeah.
I called off the fire engine one time at
What'd
the
you
tree
say to
line.
her, by the way?
I said, I love you, oh, it's okay, or whatever.
Yeah.
I got off the fire truck up in Bedford Center one time for the tree lighting, and I got down off the truck, and there was this little girl who lived at the end of Fletcher Road, who I called, her name was Megan, and I called her Meg. I was Mr. Smith.
How long ago was this?
I don't know, years ago.
Okay.
And I said, and I used to call her Megsy. Santa gets off the truck, jumps down on the sidewalk, walks up, and there she is, and I said, Megsy, how you doing? Her mother almost died.
Are they all the way on the end of Fletcher?
Yeah.
Is this the Megsy that also happens to be on our news program?
Yeah, right. So her mother goes, Santa. And she didn't blurt it out, but I knew exactly what she was about to say. And Megsy turns around and says to her mother, Mommy, Mommy, Santa knows what Mr. Art calls me.
That's awesome.
It's a riot. Every time I see Megan.
She's going to be a senior this year.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
She's going to be president of the United States someday. Every time I see her, there's a little smile.
Do you know what she's doing the weather for us now? That's a good story.
I'm not going to do Santa again this year.
How come?
It's complicated.
Okay. That's
Well,
for
it takes a
Tuesday.
lot out of me. And when I finished the Rotary one this last year, I was exhausted.
I know we have to finish up. Nick's like, come on, yes, let's go. Okay.
I was exhausted, and I said, it's time. I'd done it maybe 7 or 8 years or something.
Yeah.
And the whole thing of Santa and money and gifts, and the moments when I had those children in my lap and they were believing that I was Santa Claus. Not that I was Santa, that Santa Claus was real. And what I gave them was I believed them about who they were. And you can feel it coming up at me.
Am I going to make you cry?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't mean to clap, but like I've never seen you emotional before.
Just,
This is the part of you that I want, you know,
yeah.
because you have this soft side to you. It's not all about, you know,
Those little
this
kids.
hardcoreness.
Little,
Yeah.
little girl. Santa. Oh, Jesus. Anyway.
I'm glad
It's a beautiful
that you,
thing.
it is a beautiful thing, and it's a nice way to turn things around from all the things in the world that aren't, you know, as loving.
Yeah.
So, all right.
So when are we going to do this again?
So if you missed Ask Art, that was from 2 weeks ago, so that's up on YouTube, that you can watch that at youtube.com/BedfordTVMA. This,
What do we call this?
Neighbors to Know.
Neighbors to Know.
Maybe next year, like, I'll send you a link.
Yeah.
And then you can watch it.
Okay.
I'm wondering if I should even edit a thing, but we'll see. Yeah, and we'll get it up there. But yeah, I will be back on Art's show on Ask Art, which is every 2 weeks here, so you can catch us on there. I also want to thank those of you, by the way, that have followed me on, or not me, well, I guess me, the show. All my friends that follow me on Facebook, that's weird. No, the people that have liked me on, I sent you a friend request, by the way, that you have to respond to if you consider to be my friend.
But you got to get on Facebook to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that.
So yeah, there's been a lot of viewers that have been watching the show, and I thank you so much for doing that. And yeah, we'll see who we have on for episode 4. So thank you, Art, for coming on.
You're entirely welcome. I loved it.
And then we'll continue our conversation on Ask Art.
Sometime.
Yeah, sometime soon. So thanks everyone for watching.